March 19, 1945. 10:12 a.m. Yokosuka Naval Air, Technical Arsenal, Honshu, Japan. You can hear the wind first slipping through broken scaffolding and rattling loose sheets of tin along the airfield perimeter. Inside the hangar, the sound changes. It becomes a steady metallic echo of boots on concrete, the scrape of chalk against a drafting board, the low hum of an electrical generator straining against rationed power. The air smells of oil-damp wood and overheated wiring. At the center of the hangar sits an aircraft that does not yet look like a weapon. Short wings, stubby fuselage, 2 engine nacelles tucked close to the body like an afterthought. It rests on blocks unfinished skin panels exposing ribs and fuel lines. Painted on the side in neat characters is a name that feels almost casual given the state of the war. Kika. Commander Susumu Takaoka of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service stands with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the aircraft from a careful distance. His uniform is immaculate despite the dust. He listens as Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamana speaks quickly, excitement barely restrained. The German reports confirm it. Again. Yamana says, tapping a folder thick with translated documents. The Messerschmitt Me-262 reached operational speed beyond any piston aircraft. Allied pilots could not intercept it. Even now they fear it. Takaoka nods once. Not impressed, not skeptical. Certain they arrived too late, he replies. Just as ours will arrive late. That is unavoidable. Around them, engineers continue working without looking up. Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura adjusts his glasses and leans into the open fuselage, inspecting a fuel line joint with a small flashlight. He knows every millimeter of this aircraft, and he knows its weaknesses better than anyone else in the room. The assumption hangs heavy in the air. Jets are impressive. Jets are fast. Jets are inevitable. But jets are not decisive. Not now. Not with the Empire already bleeding. That belief is shared by nearly everyone present. The war has already taught them what matters. Steel, oil, trained pilots, airfields that still exist by the time an aircraft is ready to fly. No one in this hangar believes the Kika will reverse anything. It is a technical exercise, a future weapon, a proof that Japan can still keep pace with the world, even as the world closes in. Outside, an air raid siren wails briefly, then cuts off. A false alarm. Or perhaps a reconnaissance aircraft too high to intercept. No one stops working. Rear Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, recently arrived from Tokyo, removes his gloves and sets them on a crate. He has just come from a briefing where American B-29 superfortresses were discussed in flat, exhausted tones. Numbers, altitudes, losses. Entire districts erased overnight. They believe jets are a miracle. Fukudome says quietly, addressing no one in particular. The Germans believe the same. It did not save Berlin. A few men allow themselves thin smiles. The Germans are finished. Everyone knows it. Their miracle weapons burned fuel they no longer had, piloted by boys trained in weeks instead of years. Japan will not repeat that mistake. That is the thinking. The Kika will fly, but it will not be rushed. It will not drain resources needed elsewhere. It will not gamble on fantasies. At least that is what the planners believe at this moment. In a corner of the hangar, a young naval engineer named Hiroshi Tanaka runs his fingers along a turbine blade laid out on cloth. It is lighter than it should be, thinner at the edges. Designed that way because better alloys are no longer available. He knows this engine will never reach the thrust levels described in the German reports. He knows the test data has gaps. He says nothing. Across the airfield, a pair of Nakajima B-6N Tenzin torpedo bombers sit abandoned engines, remove their airframes, cannibalized for parts. They are reminders of a doctrine that once made sense. Massed attacks, decisive battles, predictable enemies. Jets do not fit that doctrine. They are anomalies. Inside the planning office, maps of the home islands are covered in grease pencil markings. Expected invasion routes, air defense zones, fuel depots already destroyed. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, reassigned and sidelined after injury, listens as junior officers argue about interceptor tactics that assume unlimited sortie rates and intact runways. No American pilot will risk low altitude against a jet, one lieutenant insists. They will retreat once they see the speed. Fuchida does not respond. He watches the map. He watches how much red ink there is now. Back in the hangar, Commander Takaoka steps closer to the Kika. He places a hand on the cold metal skin. When it flies, he says it will fly for Japan's future. Not this war. No one challenges him. At this moment, the jet is not a weapon born of desperation. It is not a gamble. It is an intellectual achievement pursued with restraint. The scientists and officers surrounding it believe they understand the limits of time. They believe they understand the enemy. They believe speed alone cannot undo strategic collapse. The calm is not ignorance. It is confidence built on logic that once worked. Outside, the wind shifts. Far above the clouds, engines that no one here can hear yet are already turning toward the home islands. April 7th, 1945. 3:40 p.m., Naval General Staff Headquarters, Tokyo. The room is quiet in a way that feels unnatural for a nation at war. Paper fans move slowly in tired hands. Cigarette smoke hangs in layers beneath the ceiling lamps, blurring faces and softening edges. Outside, the city is still smoking from the previous night's raid, but inside this conference room, the discussion is clinical. Captain Akira Mita stands at the front with a stack of reports held tight against his chest. His uniform is creased. His eyes are red from lack of sleep. He clears his throat and begins. Intercepted American communications indicate increased concern over German jet aircraft. Training memoranda are already circulating among Allied air groups. They are preparing countermeasures. Several senior officers shift in their seats. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito raises an eyebrow. Germany is finished, he says. Their situation has no relevance to ours. Mita swallows and continues anyway. The concern is not limited to Europe. The Americans are adjusting bomber formations and escort tactics globally. They are anticipating jet interception even where none currently exists. A low murmur ripples across the room. It is not alarm. It is irritation. Rear Admiral Tomoji Koyanagi taps ash into a tray. Anticipation does not equal vulnerability, he replies. They fear what does not yet exist. That fear works to our advantage. The logic is simple. If the enemy prepares for something that will not arrive in time, resources are wasted. Fuel burned. Training diverted. Japan needs the Americans' distracted guessing. At the far end of the table, Commander Yoshio Shiga of the Naval Aviation Bureau leans forward. He has seen the test data from Yokosuka. He has seen the fuel consumption curves. He knows the engines barely sustain thrust beyond a few minutes at maximum output. Our own projections show limited operational endurance, Shiga says carefully. Even if deployed sortie rates would be minimal, the Americans will adapt faster than we can field replacements. His words land poorly. Vice Admiral Ito exhales sharply. Commander, you speak as if adaptation is effortless. You underestimate the inertia of their system. Their bombers are built for altitude and range, not reaction. Jets disrupt doctrine. The meeting moves on. No resolution is reached. The warnings are noted, filed, and buried beneath more immediate concerns. Convoys sunk. Airfields destroyed. Fuel allocation slashed again. Later that evening, in a smaller office overlooking the darkened city, Shiga speaks privately with engineer Kenichi Matsumura, who has been summoned from Yokosuka for consultation. They think speed alone changes everything, Shiga says. They forget production, training, maintenance. Matsumura nods. They forget fuel. He pulls a folded diagram from his bag and spreads it across the desk. It shows the Kika engine layout simplified again and again to conserve materials. Inferior alloys, reduced turbine life, short operational windows measured in hours rather than months. This engine, Matsumura says, tapping the paper will consume more fuel per minute than any aircraft we have ever fielded. We do not have that fuel. Shiga closes his eyes briefly. They believe the Americans will be shocked. They will be curious, Matsumura replies. Then they will adjust. The next morning, April 8th, American carrier aircraft strike Okinawa with overwhelming force. Reports flood Tokyo of radar-guided fighters coordinating with precision that suggests months of preparation. Pilots describe enemy aircraft changing altitude and formation in seconds, reacting faster than expected. At Yokosuka, Commander Takaoka listens to the radio traffic with growing unease. These are not the rigid enemies he remembers from earlier campaigns. These pilots maneuver aggressively. They adapt. Still, when the Kika program briefing resumes that afternoon, the tone remains measured. Lieutenant Commander Yamana presents revised timelines. First powered flight within weeks, limited test sorties soon after. Operational use remains theoretical. There is no urgency, he says, repeating language approved by superiors. We proceed deliberately. A junior test pilot named Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Nuzuka stands near the wall, arms crossed. He has flown piston interceptors against B-29 formations. He knows what speed means when every second under defensive fire matters. If we wait, Inuzuka says quietly, we may never see how they react. Several heads turn. Commander Takaoka studies him. Lieutenant Commander, this aircraft is not ready for combat. A crash would prove nothing. Inuzuka meets his gaze. A delay may prove everything. The comment is noted. Nothing changes. Meanwhile, intercepted Allied intelligence continues to hint at something deeper. American engineers are experimenting with new radar frequencies, new ammunition types, adjusted climb profiles. None of this is openly discussed at high levels. It contradicts the assumption that jets will arrive too late to matter. In Tokyo, a memo circulates briefly within the Army Air Headquarters before being stamped and shelved. It describes a hypothetical engagement where a small number of jet aircraft achieve initial surprise but fail to sustain pressure due to fuel constraints and maintenance demands. The conclusion is blunt. Technological novelty without logistical depth accelerates exhaustion. No one forwards it. By mid-April, American bombers begin attacking aircraft production facilities with increasing accuracy. Rail lines feeding Yokosuka are hit. Power outages stretch longer. The Kika prototype is rolled between hangars at night to avoid detection. Each delay reinforces the belief that the jet program is peripheral, too fragile to gamble on, too late to shape events. The warnings are not dramatic. They do not predict catastrophe. They suggest limitation, adaptation, diminishing returns, and that is why they fail to gain traction. In a war already filled with disasters, a warning that something will not work well enough does not inspire urgency. It inspires postponement. By the end of April 1945, Japanese planners still believe the jet represents a future problem for the enemy, not a present solution for themselves. The world is already moving faster than they expect. May the 5th, 1945, 6:18 a.m., Ibaraki Prefecture, Eastern Honshu. The ground trembles before anyone sees the aircraft. At the edge of a half-concealed test strip carved into farmland, Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka tightens his gloved hands around the control column. The cockpit smells of hot metal and fuel so thin it feels almost imaginary. Ahead of him, the narrow runway disappears into morning mist. There is no tower, no ceremonial send-off, only a small cluster of engineers standing back at a safe distance, watching with expressions that mix pride and dread. The engines spool unevenly at first. A low whine that rises hesitates, then steadies. You can hear it vibrate through the fuselage, not the familiar roar of a piston engine, but a continuous scream that feels alive, impatient. Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura watches the exhaust wash ripple across the grass. He checks his stopwatch. He knows the margins. He knows exactly how long the engines can run before heat and stress begin to eat at components that should never have been built this way. Inuzuka releases the brakes. The Kika lurches forward, acceleration building in a way that feels wrong to anyone used to propellers. There is no rhythmic surge, just a relentless push. The airframe rattles, instruments flicker as the generator struggles to keep up. At 90 knots, the nose feels light. At 110, Inuzuka pulls gently. The aircraft lifts. For a moment, there is silence on the ground. Then shouting, not cheers. Relief. The Kika climbs shallowly, staying low as planned. The sky above is clear, pale blue, streaked with high cloud. Somewhere, far to the south, American bombers are already inbound on other targets, but here for now, there is only the sound of the jet tearing forward. Inuzuka adjusts trim. The controls feel heavy but responsive. Speed builds quickly. 200 knots, 250. He has never felt anything like it. The ground slides beneath him with unnatural speed. Trees blur. Roads vanish behind him almost instantly. This is what the Germans meant. Back on the ground, Matsumura exchanges a look with Commander Takaoka, who arrived before dawn to witness the test, despite earlier reservations. Neither man speaks. The aircraft is airborne. That alone changes something fundamental. Inuzuka levels off and checks engine temperatures. They are climbing faster than expected. He throttles back slightly, unwilling to push beyond test limits on the first flight. Then the radio crackles. Unidentified fast mover at low altitude grid reference, east of Choshi. A voice says in clipped English. Inuzuka stiffens. That transmission is not meant for him. It is bleeding through frequencies cluttered by war. American monitoring stations are already reacting. He glances at the horizon. Contrails, high above, far beyond interception altitude, a formation of B-29 superfortresses move steadily north. Their engines glitter in the sunlight. They are not here for him. They are flying past. But then, something else appears. 2 dots peel away from the formation, diving with controlled precision. Inuzuka knows the silhouette before his mind fully accepts it. P-51. Mustangs. Long wings, clean lines, fast. Return immediately. Takaoka orders over the radio. Do not engage. Inuzuka acknowledges already banking. The Mustangs descend rapidly, their pilots curious more than aggressive. They have been briefed on rumors, German jets, strange sightings. But this is the first time they see something like this over Japan. One American pilot, Captain James Whitaker of the 15th Fighter Group, squints through his canopy as the unknown aircraft flashes below. That thing's not prop-driven, he says into his radio. Repeat, not prop-driven. The Kika accelerates as Inuzuka pushes throttle again, instinctively seeking distance. The response is immediate. Speed surges. The aircraft feels like it is slipping free of gravity itself. Whitaker pushes his Mustang, hard engine straining, but the gap widens instead of closing. Hell of a thing, he mutters. On the ground, Matsumura watches the sky with growing alarm. This was never meant to happen. The test flight was supposed to be invisible, controlled. The enemy was not supposed to see it. The Mustangs do not fire. They circle once, then climb back toward the bombers. Their mission, not interception, but observation. Observation is enough. Inuzuka lands hard, minutes later, tires screeching as he brings the Kika down faster than planned. The engines wind down reluctantly, heat shimmering off the nacelles. Engineers swarm the aircraft, checking for damage leaks, stress fractures. Matsumura climbs onto a ladder and peers inside an access panel. The turbine blades are already showing discoloration. Commander Takaoka pulls Inuzuka aside. They saw you, he says flatly. Inuzuka nods. They could not catch me. That is not the point. By that afternoon, American intelligence summaries include a new entry. A fast jet-like aircraft observed near the Japanese coast. Estimated performance exceeding current Japanese capabilities. Unknown operational status. The reaction is not panic. It is focus. In a briefing room aboard an American carrier, pilots are told to expect the unexpected. Engagement protocols are discussed. Radar operators are instructed to watch for low-altitude, high-speed contacts. Ammunition allocations are adjusted. In Tokyo, word of the encounter reaches the Naval General Staff by evening. The tone shifts subtly. No longer hypothetical. No longer future tense. Rear Admiral Fukudome reads the report twice, then a third time. They have seen it, he says quietly. The Kika is no longer invisible. It is no longer theoretical. It has entered the war not as a weapon, but as a question, and questions invite answers. May 12, 1945. 9:05 a.m. Naval Air Headquarters, Tokyo. Rain taps softly against the windows, blurring the city into a gray smear of ruins and smoke. Inside the operations room, the mood has shifted from detachment to urgency, though no one is willing to name it that way. A large wall map of eastern Honshu is marked with fresh symbols in red pencil. Circles where American aircraft were sighted. Arrows showing estimated patrol routes. A single black mark near Ibaraki circled twice. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito stands with his hands on the table leaning forward. His voice is steady, but the cadence is faster than before. The Americans observed the aircraft but did not engage. This suggests uncertainty, not readiness. Across from him, Commander Yoshio Shiga listens in silence. He has read the intercepted American chatter translated overnight. He knows better. They will not react emotionally, Shiga says. They will react methodically. Ito straightens. Methodical reactions take time. Training manuals, briefings, adjustments. We do not have to overwhelm them. We only need to disrupt them. That word disrupt hangs in the air. It sounds modest, achievable. It avoids promises of victory. The decision comes quickly, faster than usual. Limited operational deployment is authorized, not combat in the traditional sense, but controlled interception trials against American reconnaissance and bomber formations when opportunity allows. Commander Susumu Takaoka receives the order by encrypted radio at Yokosuka. He reads it twice, then folds the paper carefully. This is not what we prepared for, Chief Engineer Matsumura says when Takaoka shows him the message. Takaoka nods, but it is what they want. Within hours, work accelerates. The second prototype is rushed towards completion. Panels that should be reinforced are left as they are. Quality inspections are abbreviated. Fuel lines are tested once instead of twice. Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka watches the changes with unease. The aircraft feels different now. No longer an experiment, no longer a future symbol. It is being shaped into a tool. On May 14th, American B-29 bombers approach the Kanto region under scattered cloud cover. Visibility is uneven. Radar contacts are cluttered by weather and ground interference. The conditions are imperfect, which makes them ideal. Inuzuka is strapped into the Kika before dawn. His breathing fogs the canopy briefly before the defogger catches up. Ground crew signals are quick. There is no ceremony. The engines ignite with a violent shriek. As he lifts off, the acceleration presses him back harder than before. Fuel load is heavier. The aircraft climbs slower. He can feel the strain. At 15,000 feet, he levels off and pushes forward. The bombers appear as dark shapes ahead, massive and steady. Their formation is loose confident. No escort fighters in sight yet. In the lead bomber, Captain Harold Simmons scans the sky, boredom fighting alertness. He has flown dozens of missions over Japan. Flak is expected, fighters less so. Then the radar operator shouts. Fast contact closing from below and behind. Simmons leans forward. Say again. The Kika slices through the formation at astonishing speed, too fast to track visually for more than a heartbeat. No shots are fired. No attack run is made. It is a pass. Shock ripples through the American formation. What the hell was that? Someone shouts over the intercom. In another bomber, a gunner swivels his turret wildly, searching empty sky. Inuzuka feels the exhilaration and the fear at the same time. The speed is intoxicating. The silence between bursts of engine whine is unreal, but the engine temperature needle is climbing past safe limits. He pulls away, descending rapidly, heart pounding. The effect is immediate. American bombers tighten formation. Radio chatter spikes. Escort fighters are requested sooner than planned. Mission timing slips. In Tokyo, the report is received with satisfaction. They reacted, Vice Admiral Ito says. As expected. What is missed is how they reacted. By the next day, American escort patterns shift. Fighters begin flying lower, spreading out, scanning beneath bomber formations instead of above. Radar operators adjust filters to detect high-speed, low-altitude contacts. Pilots are briefed on energy tactics rather than pursuit. On May 16th, another Kika sortie is attempted. This time, Lieutenant Commander Inuzuka encounters resistance. As he approaches a bomber group, 3 P-51 Mustangs dive toward him from offset angles. They do not chase. They bracket. Inuzuka rolls hard, pulling away with speed, but the maneuver costs altitude and fuel. One Mustang fires a short burst, not to hit, but to force a turn. The jet escapes, but barely. On the ground, Matsumura inspects the engines afterward and finds microfractures in a turbine blade. He knows what that means. Reduced lifespan, reduced trust. He reports it. The response from Tokyo is curt. Acceptable risk. That phrase appears in memos now. Acceptable risk. It is a language shift, a sign that the aircraft is being mentally reclassified from experiment to expendable asset. Fuel allocations are adjusted slightly upward. Still nowhere near what is required for sustained operations. Training is rushed. 2 additional pilots are cleared for jet conversion after minimal instruction. They have never flown anything like this. American intelligence, meanwhile, begins referring to the aircraft as a jet interceptor in internal documents. Threat assessments are revised, not dramatically, but enough. The Japanese planners believe they have achieved disruption. What they do not see is that disruption is temporary, while adaptation compounds. The Kika has revealed itself, but it has not revealed its limits to its own commanders. Those limits are about to assert themselves. May 22nd, 1945. 4:47 a.m., Yokosuka Naval Air. Technical Arsenal. The hangar lights flicker as power surges through the aging grid, then stabilize just enough to cast long shadows across the concrete floor. Outside, the sky is still black, the air heavy with salt and smoke drifting in from the coast. Inside, the mood is tense in a way that feels new. Not fear. Recognition. Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka sits alone in the cockpit of the Kika canopy, open helmet resting on his knee. He listens to the distant rumble of anti-aircraft guns from another sector, each dull thud echoing through the steel ribs of the hangar. The Americans are hitting somewhere else this morning. For now. Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura approaches with a clipboard, his expression tight. "This engine cannot be flown again today," he says quietly. The left turbine shows deformation beyond tolerance. Inuzuka nods. He already knew. Commander Suzumu Takaoka joins them moments later, boots clicking sharply on the floor. He takes the clipboard, scans the notes, then looks back at the aircraft. How long to replace the blade? Matsumura does not hesitate. "We do not have a replacement." Silence follows. Not the uncomfortable kind, the heavy kind. The turning point is not announced with alarms or shouted orders. It arrives in the form of absence. Missing parts, empty fuel drums, engineers with nothing left to improvise. Later that morning, a briefing is held in a smaller room away from the hangar. Only essential personnel are present. Takaoka, Matsumura, Inuzuka. 2 representatives from the Naval Aviation Bureau, sent from Tokyo. One of them, Captain Ryohei Nakamura, lays out the situation plainly. American escorts are now anticipating jet appearance. They are adjusting formation spacing and timing. Radar interception reports show improved response times. Inuzuka leans forward. They are learning faster than we are flying. No one argues. Fuel allocation figures are reviewed next. The numbers are stark. Each Kika sortie consumes more fuel than a full day of operations for an entire interceptor squadron flying conventional aircraft. Nakamura folds his hands. Headquarters believes limited use is still justified. Symbolic value remains. Matsumura's jaw tightens. Symbolism does not cool engines. The words hang in the air longer than intended. That afternoon, American bombers strike a rail junction less than 30 kilometers from Yokosuka. The blast shakes the ground hard enough to rattle tools off benches. Dust drifts from the ceiling. The power cuts out completely for several minutes. When the lights return, Matsumura is already examining damage reports. A shipment of specialized steel meant for turbine work has been destroyed en route. There will be no more. At dusk, Commander Takaoka steps outside the hangar and watches the sky darken. Fires burn on the horizon, dull orange against the encroaching night. He knows this view. Everyone does now. He remembers the confidence of March. The belief that jets were a future concern, that speed alone was insufficient to change outcomes. That restraint was wisdom. Those assumptions were not wrong. They were incomplete. The realization does not arrive as panic. It arrives as arithmetic. Fuel burned versus fuel delivered. Hours flown versus hours required. Engines produced versus engines failing. On May 24th, an order arrives authorizing a final demonstration sortie intended to test American response under controlled conditions. It is framed as data collection, not combat. Inuzuka volunteers without being asked. The flight begins just after noon. Weather is clear, visibility excellent, the worst possible conditions for surprise. The Kika climbs sluggishly under full load. Inuzuka feels every second ticking away as fuel drains faster than expected. At altitude, he spots the bombers early. They are already alert. Fighters weave beneath them, scanning constantly. He makes one high-speed pass, staying just out of effective gun range. The response is immediate and disciplined. Fighters split, bombers tighten. No confusion, no hesitation. A Mustang peels off and dives toward him, not to chase, but to herd. Inuzuka banks, hard feeling the aircraft shudder under stress. It was never designed to endure repeatedly. Engine temperature spikes into the red. Warning lights flicker. He breaks away and dives, throttling back, praying the engines hold together long enough to reach the coast. They do, barely. When he lands, the left engine seizes as the aircraft rolls to a stop. Smoke curls from the nacelle. Ground crew rush forward with extinguishers, but the fire never takes. There is nothing left to burn. Matsumura inspects the damage in silence. The turbine blades are warped beyond use. The casing shows stress fractures. This engine will never run again. Takaoka stands beside him. This aircraft will not fly again, Matsumura says. Takaoka nods once. That evening, a message is sent to Tokyo recommending suspension of further jet operations pending resource reassessment. The wording is careful, respectful, honest. The reply comes the next morning, acknowledged. No further instructions follow. That is the moment no one wanted to admit. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is final. The jet did not fail spectacularly. It did not crash in flames or fall to enemy fire. It simply reached the edge of what Japan could support. The Americans adapted. The engines wore out. The fuel vanished. The Kika had arrived, not too late to be seen, but too early to be sustained. And now, there is no time left to pretend otherwise. May 28th, 1945. 2:10 a.m. Tokyo Naval Ministry Underground Command Center. The air is stale and warm despite the depth. Fans hum weakly, pushing cigarette smoke in lazy circles beneath bare bulbs. Maps line the walls, updated so often that layers of pencil marks blur into gray scars. The city above is quiet for the moment, a deceptive calm that never lasts. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito sits at the head of the table, jacket removed, collar undone. He stares at a fuel allocation sheet as if willing the numbers to change. They are requesting more, he says at last. No one asks who they are. Everyone knows. Commander Yoshio Shiga clears his throat. Yokosuka reports that without increased fuel, no further jet sorties are possible. Even limited demonstrations. Ito lets out a short breath. And if we divert fuel from conventional interceptors, we lose daily coverage, Shiga replies, and still gain only hours of jet operation. Silence follows. Not thoughtful silence. Shock. The realization that there is no clever redistribution left. Every barrel is already promised twice over. A junior staff officer breaks its voice, unsteady. Perhaps a single decisive action, one massed jet sortie against a major raid. The psychological effect. Ito raises a hand. With how many aircraft? The officer hesitates. 2, possibly 3. The idea collapses under its own weight. In another room, deeper underground, Rear Admiral Shigeru Fukudome listens as a liaison officer reads the Yokosuka damage assessment aloud. Engine failures, material fatigue, no replacement alloys, no spare parts. So the aircraft works, Fukudome says slowly. But the system does not. Yes, sir. Above ground at Yokosuka. Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura walks alone along the edge of the runway at dawn. The concrete is cracked in places from previous bomb damage. Patches mark hurried repairs. He stops near the burned-out engine nacelle of the Kika and rests a hand against the cold metal. This is what success looks like now. A machine proven capable in theory and useless in practice. Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka finds him there. They want another flight, Inuzuka says without preamble. Headquarters is asking if anything can be made operational. Matsumura does not turn. They are asking because they are afraid to admit there is nothing left. Inuzuka nods. If I could fly again, I would. I know. The confusion reaches down the chain quickly. Orders contradict each other. One message instructs preparation for emergency jet defense of Tokyo. Another advises preservation of remaining prototypes for future study. A third suggests dismantling the engines to prevent capture. Engineers argue. Pilots wait. Fuel trucks arrive and leave half-full redirected elsewhere. On May the 30th, American bombers strike Yokosuka directly. The raid begins just after noon. Sirens wail. Anti-aircraft guns open fire almost immediately, black bursts dotting the sky. In the hangar, personnel scatter, grabbing what they can, covering equipment with tarps in a gesture that feels absurd. A near miss shakes the building violently. Dust rains from the ceiling. Lights flicker, then die. When the all-clear finally sounds, the damage is clear. One hangar partially collapsed, several test rigs destroyed. The Kika airframe survives, but the workshop that sustained it does not. That evening, Commander Takaoka convenes his remaining staff by lantern light. We cannot protect this site, he says. We cannot operate from it. We cannot rebuild it. No one argues. In Tokyo, panic does not look like shouting. It looks like rapid meetings that end without decisions. It looks like officers staring too long at maps. It looks like desperate proposals framed as strategic innovation. One such proposal reaches Vice Admiral Ito on June 1st. A plan to load the Kika with explosive charges and use it in a special attack role. A final use for speed when endurance is gone. Ito reads it once, then again. His face tightens. This is not what it was built for, he says, but he does not reject it immediately. The shock is not that the jet failed. It is that it succeeded just enough to reveal how badly the rest of the system is failing. Speed without fuel, innovation without industry, courage without options. At Yokosuka, Matsumura begins dismantling components by hand, cataloging what little data remains. Measurements, stress patterns, notes scribbled in the margins of ruined notebooks. This will matter someday, he tells himself. It is a thin comfort. Inuzuka receives orders transferring him back to conventional units. He returns to a world of piston engines and desperate climbs, knowing what speed feels like now, and knowing he will never feel it again. On June 3rd, American fighters strafe the airfield at dawn, firing into hangars already half destroyed. The Kika is moved one last time, rolled into a revetment and covered with netting. It is an artifact now, not a weapon. The confusion settles into resignation. The desperate decisions come too late and point in too many directions. Protect it, use it, destroy it, save it. None of those choices restore what is missing. By early June 1945, the Japanese jet program exists in name only. A handful of reports, a single damaged airframe, engines that proved something true and useless at the same time. The shock is complete not because the Americans have been stopped, but because they have not been meaningfully slowed. The war does not pause to acknowledge technological milestones. It grinds forward, indifferent to effort and intention. And now the men who once dismissed jets as arriving too late must face a more painful truth. They arrived at exactly the wrong moment. June 10th, 1945. 8:22 a.m. Yokosuka Naval Air Technical Arsenal ruins. Morning light spills through shattered roof panels, illuminating dust that never fully settles. The hangar no longer feels like a place of work. It feels like a shell picked clean. Tools lie where they were dropped days earlier. Workbenches are split and scorched. A faint smell of burned insulation lingers in the air mixed with salt from the nearby sea. Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura steps carefully through the debris, clipboard tucked under his arm out of a habit more than necessity. The pages are nearly full. There will be no more entries worth making. Against the far wall rests what remains of the Kika. Its skin is intact, but the aircraft looks smaller, now diminished by its surroundings. The engines are gone removed and hidden separately to prevent capture or destruction. Without them, the jet resembles a sculpture more than a machine. Commander Susumu Takaoka joins Matsumura, his uniform stained with dust and sweat. He looks older than he did in March. Not from injury, from subtraction. The original plan is finished, Takaoka says. He does not phrase it as an announcement, it is simply a statement of fact. The original plan had been clear once. Develop a jet quietly, learn from it, preserve resources, keep it as a future asset, avoid reckless commitment. Let speed remain an idea rather than a gamble. That plan required time-intact infrastructure and the ability to choose restraint. None of those exist anymore. In Tokyo, Naval Aviation Bureau meetings now focus on damage control rather than development. Charts tracking prototype progress have been replaced by lists of destroyed facilities. Names of engineers are crossed out, not reassigned. Dead, missing, dispersed. Commander Yoshio Shiga listens as a junior officer reads the latest situation report. Yokosuka capability reduced to 0. No test operations possible. No protected storage remains viable. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito closes his eyes briefly. And alternative sites, equally vulnerable or already destroyed. The jet program is officially downgraded in priority without being officially cancelled. No announcement is made. No final order is issued. It simply collapses under administrative silence. At the pilot training base, where Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka is now stationed, the mood is grim. He flies outdated interceptors against bomber formations that grow larger each week. He climbs until the engine screams, then climbs no further. He remembers the silence of the jet, the way the sky felt different at speed, the brief moment when the enemy could not reach him. That memory makes the present worse. On June 15th, American intelligence confirms that Japanese jet development exists but lacks operational capacity. The assessment is blunt, threat minimal, monitor only. The original Japanese hope that the jet might force caution, hesitation, or fear into American planning evaporates quietly on a staff officer's desk thousands of kilometers away. Back at Yokosuka, Matsumura supervises the burial of remaining engine components in a concealed pit. He marks the location on a scrap of paper, then burns it. They will not be used again, he says to no one. He is wrong in the long view, but correct in the only one that matters now. The collapse spreads beyond the jet itself. Confidence in engineering solutions falters across commands. Other advanced projects are quietly shelved. Radar improvements delayed. New interceptor concepts abandoned. The focus narrows to survival and delay. On June 18th, a meeting is held to decide the fate of the Kika airframe. Options are limited. Move it and risk destruction. Leave it and risk capture. Destroy it deliberately. Takaoka listens, then speaks. Leave it, he says. There is nothing left to learn by killing it. The airframe remains hidden under netting and debris, slowly accumulating dust. The original plan had assumed control over circumstances. It assumed that development could proceed independently of collapse. That technology could be insulated from the war, consuming everything else. That assumption dies here. As June wears on, American raids increase in intensity. Daylight bombing becomes routine. Night offers no relief. Infrastructure that might have supported a second-generation jet disappears piece by piece. In Tokyo, Vice Admiral Ito signs an order reallocating remaining aviation fuel exclusively to conventional defense units. The jet is not mentioned. It no longer needs to be. He pauses before sealing the document pen, hovering. "This was supposed to matter," he says softly. No one answers. The collapse is not dramatic. There is no final explosion, no last flight, no desperate charge into history. The jet program ends the way systems end when overwhelmed. It stops being fed. What remains are fragments, reports, memories, a handful of men who know how close something came to existing fully. For the Americans, the collapse is invisible. They do not see a failed plan. They see an absence of threat. For the Japanese engineers and pilots, the absence is louder than any explosion. The Kika does not crash. It does not burn in combat. It simply stands still while the war moves past it. And once the war moves past you, it never looks back. June 25th, 1945. 11:36 p.m. Naval Aviation Bureau, Temporary Offices, Tokyo. The building was never meant to serve this purpose. It is a converted school, its classrooms stripped of desks and blackboards, replaced by folding tables and map boards scavenged from destroyed headquarters. The walls are thin. Every distant explosion carries through them like a reminder that time is no longer theoretical. Commander Yoshio Shiga stands beneath a flickering light, reading a proposal that arrived less than an hour earlier. The papers smudged, the ink rushed. Emergency reactivation study. Limited jet operations from dispersed rural strips. Single engine configuration. Reduced fuel load. Shiga exhales slowly. This is what recovery looks like now. Not rebuilding, not innovation. Reinterpretation of loss as opportunity. Across the room, Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito listens as the proposal is summarized aloud. His face is drawn eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He does not interrupt. They believe a simplified configuration might allow at least one operational sortie, the officer finishes. Possibly against an invasion fleet. Ito rubs his temples. "One sortie," he repeats. "Yes, sir." Silence follows. Not disagreement. Acceptance of absurd arithmetic. "Send it to Yokosuka," Ito says finally. "See what can be salvaged." The message arrives the next morning at what remains of the Yokosuka facility. Commander Susumu Takaoka reads it standing beside the concealed Kika airframe netting, sagging over its wings. The air smells of damp earth and smoke. "They want us to make it fly again," he says to Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura. With what Matsumura replies. Takaoka does not answer. There is no answer that matters. Still work resumes. It begins, not with engines, but with paper. Matsumura and two remaining engineers spread old schematics across a crate weighing possibilities. Remove one engine, reduce weight, sacrifice range, sacrifice reliability, sacrifice safety. Every solution trades one impossibility for another. By June 28th, they have a plan that exists only because nothing else does. A single engine installation using salvaged components from damaged prototypes. Minimal instrumentation. Enough fuel for minutes, not missions. Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka is summoned back from his unit. When he arrives, he sees the aircraft's stripped-down panels, removed structure exposed like bone. It feels less like resurrection and more like autopsy performed in reverse. "They want me to fly it," he says. "They want someone to," Takaoka replies. Inuzuka studies the aircraft. It will not outrun fighters for long. No, it will not climb well. No, it may not land. No. Inuzuka nods. That settles it. American bombers fly overhead daily, now often unchallenged. Their presence is constant like weather. Each attempt to revive the jet feels increasingly detached from the reality pressing in from all sides. On July 1st, a test run of the salvaged engine is attempted. It lasts 40 seconds before vibrations force shutdown. Matsumura watches the gauges drop and does not bother to swear. "We can try again," an assistant says weakly. With what blade, Matsumura asks. The assistant says nothing. In Tokyo, the Bureau receives the update and responds with encouragement that feels hollow even as it is written. Keep trying. Any data is valuable. Data for what future? By July 4th, the invasion of Okinawa has ended. Reports of American casualties circulate alongside intelligence assessments predicting invasion of the home islands. Every conversation is framed by that expectation now. The jet becomes a fantasy again, but a different one than before. Not a future weapon, a final gesture. On July 8th, another proposal surfaces. Use the jet as a reconnaissance platform. One high-speed dash over enemy fleet concentrations. No return required. Ito reads it and sets it aside. He does not forward it. He does not destroy it. It exists in the space between action and refusal. At Yokosuka, Matsumura supervises one last attempt to restore engine function. He works through the night, hands blackened, eyes burning. He knows this machine intimately. He knows where it will fail. At dawn, the engine starts. It runs unevenly, but it runs. Inuzuka is called immediately. He straps in as ground crew pull away, faces tight with something between hope and dread. The aircraft taxis slowly. Every vibration feels amplified. At the edge of the strip, Inuzuka pauses. He thinks of the first flight, the clean acceleration, the moment of silence. This will not be that. He advances throttle. The jet lurches forward, struggling to build speed. The single engine howls in protest. The runway rushes past too slowly. At the last possible moment, the aircraft lifts, barely clearing the ground. Cheers do not come from the ground. Only breath held. Inuzuka climbs shallowly, afraid to push. Altitude comes grudgingly. Speed lags. Then the engine temperature spikes violently. Warning lights flash. Vibrations worsen. The thrust fades. Inuzuka turns back immediately, heart hammering. The aircraft shudders as he lines up for landing controls, sluggish response delayed. He touches down, hard. The gear holds. The aircraft skids, then stops. The engine dies completely. Silence settles over the strip. Matsumura reaches the aircraft first. He looks at the engine, then at Inuzuka, then away. That was the last one, he says. No one argues. The attempt to recover what was already lost ends not with failure, but with exhaustion. There is nothing left to simplify, nothing left to strip away, rip. The jet cannot be forced into relevance by will alone. In Tokyo, the Bureau receives the final report and does not respond. There is nothing left to ask. The war continues. The bombers return. The ground shakes. The future narrows. The kicker sits once more under netting unchanged, but now undeniably finished. The attempt to reclaim it has only clarified what was already true. You cannot outrun collapse. August 6, 1945. 8:14 a.m., Hiroshima Prefecture, Japan. The morning is clear. Too clear. Sunlight reflects off the rivers, threading through the city calm and ordinary. From the hills outside Yokosuka, Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka listens to a routine radio transmission while standing beside an obsolete interceptor that has not flown in days. The signal crackles, then sharpens. Single aircraft sighted at extreme altitude. No escort, course steady. No one reacts strongly at first. High-altitude reconnaissance flights have become common. One aircraft does not change anything anymore. At Yokosuka, Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura is in the remains of his office carefully packing notebooks into a wooden crate. He has decided which records to preserve and which to burn. The jet data is thin now, mostly stress logs and failure notes. Proof of limits, not breakthroughs. A junior technician bursts in. Sir Radio reports unusual flash over Hiroshima. Matsumura pauses. Flash. Yes, sir. Bright, instantaneous. Communications disrupted. They wait. Seconds stretch. Then minutes. The radio erupts into overlapping voices. Confusion. Fragments. A single bomb. City gone. No fire spread pattern matches incendiaries. At Naval Aviation Bureau offices in Tokyo, Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito listens as the situation becomes impossible to interpret with existing assumptions. He grips the edge of the table. One aircraft, he repeats. One bomb. The realization does not arrive as understanding. It arrives as collapse of expectation. Within hours, reports confirm devastation beyond anything previously imagined. Infrastructure erased. Communications dead. Casualty figures meaningless because there is nothing left to count properly. In this context, the jet ceases to matter entirely. For the men who built it flew. It argued over it. The moment of realization is not just that the war is lost. That knowledge has existed for months in quieter forms. It is that speed, innovation, restraint, and even desperation have all been overtaken by something that ignores them completely. On August 7th, Matsumura walks one last time to the concealed Kika airframe. He pulls back the netting slightly and rests his hand on the cold metal. It was never late, he says softly. It was irrelevant. At pilot headquarters, Inuzuka receives orders grounding all remaining aircraft to conserve fuel. He sits on the edge of his bunk helmet in his lap and stares at the floor. He remembers the Mustangs failing to close, the fleeting belief that something had shifted. It had not. In Tokyo, Vice Admiral Io signs documents he no longer believes in. Defensive allocations, emergency dispersals. None of it addresses what has just been revealed. The jet had represented a belief that war could still be shaped by human decision and engineering trade-offs. That timing mattered, that arriving too late or too early made a difference. Hiroshima proves that the scale has changed completely. On August 9th, news of a second detonation reaches Tokyo. The confirmation ends, remaining debate. Meetings shorten, voices lower. No one argues about fuel anymore. The Kika is mentioned once in a briefing only as an item to be destroyed or surrendered intact, depending on occupation orders. No one objects. For Matsumura, the realization is personal. He understands now that the jet was never meant to alter this war. It belonged to a different conflict, one that values endurance and industry over singular brilliance. For Inuzuka, it is simpler. He had felt the future for minutes at a time. He had outrun fighters. He had believed briefly that speed could restore initiative. That belief dissolves quietly. The moment of realization is not dramatic. It is not accompanied by speeches or declarations. It is a narrowing of thought until only one conclusion fits all evidence. There is no scenario left where anything they built changes the outcome. The war has moved beyond interception. It has moved beyond defense. It has moved beyond them. August 15th, 1945. 12:01 p.m. Tokyo. The radio crackles, then steadies. The voice that emerges is thin, distant, almost unreal. It does not sound like command. It sounds like apology wrapped in ceremony. In a classroom-turned-office, Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito stands, rigid cap tucked under his arm, eyes fixed on the wooden radio cabinet as the Emperor's words unfold. Around him, officers remain frozen, not at attention, but suspended, unsure how to inhabit the moment. When the broadcast ends, no one speaks. There is nothing left to debate. By that afternoon, orders flow not with urgency, but with inevitability. Cease operations, secure documents, prevent unauthorized destruction, prepare to receive occupation forces. The jet program is addressed in a single paragraph. All advanced aircraft projects to be preserved where possible. Engines disabled. Airframe secured. At Yokosuka, Chief Engineer Kenichi Matsumura receives the message as he sits on a crate beside the Kika, now fully uncovered. The netting has been removed. There is no longer any reason to hide it. Sunlight falls across the fuselage, revealing imperfections he once catalogued with care. Rough welds, thin panels, compromises frozen into metal. He reads the order once, then folds it neatly. So it ends not with fire or flight, but with inventory. Lieutenant Commander Toyohiko Inuzuka arrives shortly after his uniform dusty. His expression hollow, he circles the aircraft, slowly touching nothing. I thought it would fly again someday, he says. Matsumura nods. It will, just not for us. They work together in silence, removing what must be disabled. Fuel lines cut, control linkages locked. Nothing dramatic, just enough to ensure the aircraft cannot leave the ground under its own power. On August 18th, American reconnaissance aircraft pass overhead without opposition. Days later, ground units arrive. They move cautiously at first, weapons ready, then with growing confidence as resistance fails to materialize. An American technical intelligence team reaches Yokosuka by the end of the month. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Fields steps into the hangar and stops short. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmurs. He circles the kicker with professional curiosity notebook already open. His team photographs everything, measures, notes the engine configuration, the stripped-down structure. "Looks like a Me-262 that went on a diet," one engineer jokes. Fields does not laugh. And starved doing it. He understands immediately what he's looking at. Not a failure of imagination, a failure of time. In Tokyo, Vice Admiral Ito submits his final report. It is brief, clinical. It mentions the jet, once describing it as technically successful but operationally irrelevant. He pauses before signing, then adds a single line by hand. "Resource collapse preceded technological maturity." He signs and sets the pen down. For Matsumura, the aftermath stretches into weeks of debriefings and translations. He answers American questions honestly. He does not exaggerate achievements. He does not hide failures. "They believed jets would arrive too late to matter," an American officer remarks during one session. Matsumura considers this carefully. "They arrived at the only moment they could," he replies. When nothing else could, the Americans do not argue. Inuzuka is interviewed separately. They ask about speed, handling, combat potential. It could escape, he tells them, but it could not stay. That distinction seems to interest them more than any performance figure. As September passes, the Kicker is crated and shipped for further evaluation. It leaves Japan without ceremony, loaded onto a transport vessel, among countless other artifacts of a defeated empire. The hangar at Yokosuka is finally cleared. Matsumura watches the space empty out until only oil stains remain on the floor. The war is over, but its consequences are not abstract. Cities are ruins. Food is scarce. Futures are uncertain. For those who built the jet, there is no redemption in hindsight. No comfort in knowing they were close. The aircraft did not fail because it was poorly conceived. It failed because it belonged to a war that required patience, industry, and stability, none of which existed anymore. Japanese scientists had believed jet aircraft would come too late to change the war. They were half right. They came late enough that they could not be sustained. They came early enough to reveal what the future would demand. That knowledge does not alter what has already happened. It simply remains carried forward by others, under different flags with different resources, into a world reshaped by forces no aircraft could outrun. At Yokosuka, the runway cracks widen with time. Grass pushes through concrete. The sky above is quiet now, free of contrails. Nothing takes off. Nothing needs to.